Hello and welcome to You Are Intuitive, a refreshingly honest and candid series of conversations about developing and using intuition in the real world. I am your host, Dana Mahacek, and it is such an honor to have you tuning in. My guest today is an intuitive healer, holistic counselor, and tarot reader based in Brooklyn, New York. Lindsay Mack is the founder of Wild Soul Healing and Soul Tarot School, and she facilitates soul tarot readings, intuitive and spiritual coaching, mentorship, and tarot trainings for those who desire to heal, evolve, and live fully on their true soul path. As a joyful and healthy survivor of childhood abuse, trauma, and PTSD, Lindsay is passionately dedicated to honoring and helping to bring space, light, and healing to those who are experiencing mental, emotional, or physical suffering. It was her own healing from a breakdown in 2014 that fully birthed her into this sacred work and onto her soul path, and she is honored to be sharing these offerings to those who feel called to them now. Lindsay is the weekly and monthly Taroscope contributor for the Numinous and has created the monthly channeled tarot column for Of the Wolves. She has had pieces on tarot and spirituality published in Nourished Journal, Stone Fox Bride, Mind Body Green, and Life as Ceremony. And her work has also been written about and featured in Huffington Post and Nylon magazine, to name a few. Despite her many accomplishments and accolades, Lindsay is truly one of the most down-to-earth and refreshingly real people I have ever had the pleasure of connecting with. It was an absolute honor to sit down with her and to riff on intuition, and I hope that you enjoy our conversation. Thank you again so much for being here. All right. Hi, Lindsay. I am so beside myself with excitement to speak with you today. Like, how can I say this in a way that doesn't sound super creepy?
I welcome the effusiveness and return it tenfold to you. It's a great honor to be here. I'm very excited. Thank you for having me.
I want to dive just like right in because I know, or at least I see you as someone who is very candid, very upfront, very honest, kind of like slicing through the posturing and the bullshit and just all of the shimmery veneers that are so often found in the spiritual world. So I just want to get right into it. And I want to start just by asking you who the stereotypical intuitive is. Like, who do you see predominantly as being allowed or able to be intuitive?
Like the perception, right?
Yes.
The illusion.
Totally. Yeah. Not the reality.
Yeah. I'm actually just gonna I'm gonna speak true to my name, true to my reputation that has been. I think the people who talk about it. Yeah, because it's not that I have any judgment or any issue about it, but it's difficult to describe, isn't it? Because being an intuitive is extraordinarily subtle, which is the devastation of the posturing, because it would have you believe that these ecstatic experiences are happening all the time, and I'm not. They may very well be for some people. I'm not that woman. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's really important for that to be shared, because I think it's often a private thing. I think it's often a really difficult thing to put into words. Mm-hmm. And there's a bombasticness that I see that I think is I see it really in two camps. It's sort of the bombastic person who's always having these deep orgasmic experiences with like rose petals and, you know, literally
Incense.
Jesus.
Literally
Yeah.
Jesus.
And that's, yeah. And I'm all about that. I feel like I've
Mm.
drifted into those areas too. I'm sure you have as well.
Mhm.
And then I feel like there's the person who just seems to be very untouchable and never speaks about being in crisis, unsure, wrong.
Mhm.
That's, I think, a deep danger. And I think there is, you know, I wouldn't say a danger to the bombastically inclined external intuitive. I say more power to, you know, but yeah, I think stereotypical is like all white. I mean that in more ways than one, but all white.
Mhm.
I think often representative of a certain body type, which is totally, again, there's not any judgment there, but I would have no problem. It's never the women or the men exhibiting this. It's the fact that now, because being an intuitive has become a commercial commodity,
Yes.
that's the only thing that's represented in magazines anymore. It's not the crone, it's not the plus size woman, it's not the woman doing it way back in the back of a restaurant who is literally clear channeling. It's these very specific, I think like 10 to 20 people who I see very consistently, and God bless them, right? Because that's great. But I think the stereotypical intuitive looks like they don't quite have any problems, and also looks like a model too, which I feel like I got into. You are a health coach as well, are you not?
No, I applied to do holistic nutrition, and then I dropped out before it started.
Okay, got you. Because for some reason I thought I remembered your name from that, but I don't know. I feel like when I was coming up, there weren't like models being represented in that way, but it's different now. So yeah, I think the stereotypical intuitive, yeah, it's this really homogenous front that I don't think is fake, but it's like 2% of the people out there really doing it. And it all seems to have a sort of deep spectacularness to it, which I also think is wonderful, but not really how it is the majority of the time. At least, I mean, I don't know, maybe not in my world, but in my world, it's pretty mundane, actually.
Yeah,
So,
my world is also not 99% sparkles and rainbows, but maybe 9%.
Yeah, yeah, I would take a good solid 10%, 10 to 12%. Yeah.
Do you feel that for you personally, just your journey becoming intuitive, becoming unintuitive, how much was that stereotype a barrier or intimidating, or was it when you were coming to understand yourself as intuitive and needing to start offering intuitive services to the world?
Well, I think it was twofold. There was a twofold challenge to it. The first was that just in growing up, I really moved into doing this work in a very clear and committed way when I was 30, like 29 years old. And I just didn't get that being an intuitive was what it was. I really thought that it was genuinely hearing voices all the time, or there was an element of fear that I thought was a part of it all. I got being an intuitive, I didn't understand that it wasn't mediumship. There was a lot that I didn't understand. And the largest hurdle that I had to come over, which doesn't particularly relate to the stereotype, although I will comment on that.
Yeah.
was really just this persistent, like, oh my God, that's what being an intuitive is. I've really done that my whole life. I didn't get it, just this awareness, this continual affirmation, these spirals of affirmation. So the one was the overculture. That was the thing that I think I had to get over, was the overcultural, just sort of like media, playful definition of intuition and psychicness. And I wouldn't consider myself a psychic, but that was one piece. But, oh yeah, fuck yeah. There have certainly been, when I was in the really baby stages of coming up, just couldn't break through certain things because of background, whatever, the way I look, like, absolutely. However, that has been a challenge. But what I will say, now that I am 4 years deep into doing things intuitively, and now 7 years deep with doing holistic counseling work for people who have trauma, it's the best thing ever, because no one's coming to me expecting bells and whistles. I have a reputation that is really built on my gifts, and that's it. That's it. I don't lie to people. I don't need to look a certain way. I'm kind. I really value that level of responsibility, and I am committed to, as you are committed to, empowering people to, like, I am the doula, they are doing the pushing, period.
Yeah.
And I don't get that confused. And the only challenge that it's been is that there have been moments of difficulty that I think are part and parcel to anyone's life who's doing this work, and anyone who is really committed to that deep autonomy and empowerment to others. I've had some people who've gotten upset with me in session because I won't tell them something, or I don't know. They'll say, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. Because I don't know your future, because in this particular situation, you're in a moment of your life where you're responsible for birthing. And that just happened this week. Someone came in very desperate, and she followed up and followed up and followed up, and was a little unclear with her boundaries. And there are moments when people are in deep crisis where I will overextend in a way that's in alignment, and will reach out beyond the session. Her guides were like, absolutely not. Like, she needs to fall into her own knowing. And if you need to be an asshole to let her do that, you got to be an asshole. And so I just didn't say anything. I gently answered and just said, sweetheart, I think you need to sit with this, and I wish you luck, and just did not respond to the rest of what she wrote. So that's what has been the biggest challenge, is once again kind of the over cultural break of that. But it's been a great gift, because now I feel like it is a great gift to be able to say I'm nothing if not authentic with what I'm doing. You know, it's like there's no pressure there. Like there is, but there's a lot of pressure, but it's in the right places. It's in my health and my integrity to the practice, and not overscheduling, and being very responsible with people's nervous systems, but it's not upholding a public view of myself. That I'm not interested in that. So in that way, it was painful for me, because I was getting a lot of feedback that people were happy, and it wasn't trickling over into a more public, like, press thing. Yeah. And I had to spend a lot of time with little me on that one, because it felt a lot like rejection, but it's been the best thing. So I feel like in all kinds of different ways, it's just been over cultural, but ultimately a very freeing thing to discover my own the gifts in that. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it does make sense. And I just want to pick up on that thread of the, all this wonderful feedback and these testimonials not translating into like a bigger public presence or this like bigger splash on Instagram or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with the feelings of not enoughness, or the feelings of comparison, or of like, I'm not as far along as this other person, or I'm not as visible, or I'm doing the same thing as that person and yet I'm not getting the same kind of splash as this person? How do you deal with that in your own practice?
Well, you're catching me in a moment in my life where I feel very comfortable. Like I feel comfortable with where I am, even with that. So it's a good time for me to talk about it. But I honestly feel that at least how I dealt with it was not particularly sexy. It wasn't particularly cute, or
that's the best kind of way. That's what I want to hear about.
Yeah. I mean, it was really raw. Like, I mean, the first thing is that pang rises up, and anyone who says that they don't experience that as a liar. Yeah, like a total fucking liar. That pang rises up, and no matter what it was, whether it was someone, unfortunately, I'm in a couple situations where I've had my work lifted, like plagiarized, and have had to be straightforward about that. And I've had a couple of times where I teach people how to read tarot, and sometimes when people are students, their verbiage gets a little close for comfort, and I've had to have a couple of conversations, never about like, you took something, but let's make sure you find your own, and let's move forward on that. But I mean, to that extent, and the extent that you're talking about, the only way that I've known how to do it is that no matter what point of harbor that ship is leaving from, it always comes back to the same thing. The little one in me feels that there's not going to be enough for her. Yeah. Period. Full stop. There's never anything. I want everyone to be successful. That's really not my truth, that I don't want someone to have something. It's that there's this aspect of me that worries, but if they got this, what about me? Or if this person was able to do this, why not me? And it comes back to two things. How you deal with it is to understand that how one deals with it is to understand that experience of whatever it is, jealousy, competition, comparison, whatever it is actually bringing two really crucially important gifts that do, I think, expand intuition. And the first one is deep intimacy with shadow, and the opportunity for enormous intimacy with our inner little ones, and the opportunity, perhaps more crucially, to be willing to stop a comparison war. Because the first moment that we're sort of engaging in comparison, we're really starting war in a way that doesn't really serve. And I'm not afraid to feel the heavy things, but anyone can feel the chemistry of competition and the invitation into comparison, and say no thank you. That can run through anyone, and anyone who's ever been in recovery from alcoholism or drug addiction or sex addiction understands that very well. You can desperately want to drink and
still say no thank you.
Yeah, still say no thank you, but also say, it's really hard for me to say no thank you to this, and I kind of want everyone to know the work I'm doing right now. But yeah, I think it really is, there's powerful invitations in that. Very, very powerful. And honestly, I can speak to the opposite, which is that there have been times where things have flowed in my direction, where I think it's given people the public perception that I'm quote unquote at a level or going somewhere. And that's never the truth. I've gotten a lot of that spoken to me. We're all walking a middle path. That's it. Like, and understanding it from the other side, and how intense that light can be, and how intense that attention can be, and how big of a blowback we can get chemically from that as well. So I've tried to be really gentle and accepting, and ultimately it's led me to a place, even though I do feel sometimes really big feels of being left out of something, excluded, or just plain old fashioned like asshole feelings about something. It's really made me very conscious that there's usually a deeper root system to it. Usually I'm not paying attention to myself. Usually I'm looking for something that is external when it really needs to be internal.
Yes.
And I have found that incredibly, as spirit can do, typically those things are accompanied with a much needed social media break. Like I've probably had to take the break like maybe 5 or 6 days before I saw the thing, but it's been really powerful because I have huge not going to be enough for me stuff. I literally was raised in a way where there wasn't sometimes literally enough food, or there wasn't literally enough safety. And there's a lot of experiences that I was actually brought into where there was not enough. And I think that everyone identifies with that. And I think everyone's stuff is triggered in that. And because again, there is such a strong invitation to be on top or the best, and that's just the old structure that we're all used to being in. I've found that really the only way I can sort of move through the spiral of those feelings is to actually go that deep with it, to remember that this sister or this brother has done nothing but shine their light and attract a certain kind of mirror back to them. It has nothing to do with me, and it has nothing to do with anything other than the engagement, and bless them, because if there are certainly no mistakes, and if that person is, beaming in a certain way, that's crucial so that their community can find them, and I will be perfect as I am doing the work I'm meant to do here, whether it's for 2 people a week or 2,000 people, whatever the fuck, and also knowing that we are incarnating in a time where I believe we're moving into a much more receptive, feminine way of aligning ourselves. And I get to do that good work every time I'm triggered that someone has been in vogue, whatever. And, or, that this person was, asked to speak somewhere. I was doing something, and it's with me, it's never, ever truly like, how the fuck did this person get asked? It's always, oh man, I would have loved to have done that. What a bummer, and that's a little girl thing for me. So I get to mother her up in those moments, which is good. So that's how I deal with it.
And I find it so refreshing too, to just be speaking with you about this, because I know from my own position, it's like, oh, Lindsay, right? Like Lindsay has all these opportunities and all these, all these platforms, and to just hear it from the other side, rather than feeling like, I'm down here looking up, it levels the platform completely. And I personally find it really reassuring and really refreshing. Aww. And I'm sure that other people too who are watching it are just like, oh, phew. Right?
We are walking the same path. And I also say, I completely recognize that there are platforms that I am a part of that have elevated me. Like there's no way that I'm not all about honoring that. But, there are things there are things that, oh my gosh, there are so many things that bring me right to my knees, even to this day, right back to 5 years old. I'm like, okay, I will go right back. Sometimes I forget, and it colors my whole perception of even my community, where I'm like, no one wants me. I need to like really pull back on the Instagram posts because no one wants to hear from me anymore. Like no one, like all the time. And I just allow myself to move through all of that. And I take little breaks, and then I come back, and I'm always, at least thus far, been so delighted when I do come back and offer something, because I just started a podcast, and my podcast has just, quite frankly, totally blown me away on that front, and has once again sunk into me that the place that I think I've been looking for something is not really the place, but it's required many years of work for me to not compare myself to try to get there. Otherwise, I don't even think I would have done that podcast. I would have been too afraid to fail. You know?
And I think a lot of people watching this are sort of at the beginning stages of their own, either their own intuitive journey, period, just understanding that they are intuitive, or at the beginning of a journey of like wanting to take their intuition out and offer services. Sorry, there's just this like gigantic bus
it is
going
not
on.
a problem. It's right. It's right. Every single time I do anything, I don't know what it is. I really take it as a compliment. There's always something. And not even with you, with any ceremony I do, any podcast recording, there is like a riot or a massive truck. There's someone like taking a shower or something. So all good. All
Thank
good
you,
with
gigantic
me.
tour bus. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of people who might be encountering this conversation here are like at square one, or like square 1.5. And when you're at square one and looking at someone who's at whatever square they are on their little grid, it can be really intimidating to just start, or to just put yourself out there, or believe that you even have anything of value to put out there in the first place. But I love what you were mentioning about, you know, it might be 2 people that need to hear this message. It might be 2,000, it might be 20,000, who knows? But rather than focusing on the like, oh, why aren't there 20,000 people who are listening to this? It's like, who are the 2? You know, like, who are the 2 that I can...
We're the 2.
Yeah. And that shift in perspective, just like reeling it back in energetically, is so, it's reassuring again, but it's also, it makes it tangible and it makes it manageable, rather than like, I need to jump to the top of this mountain. It's like, I can take it one step at a time, and the people I encounter along the way can also be served by me taking these steps.
Totally. Yeah.
Do you, I already know the answer to this, but I want to ask it just for the record's sake. Do you believe that everyone is intuitive?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And do you feel for yourself, like, have you always known, I also know the answer to this question, but you haven't always like known or understood yourself as intuitive, correct?
Correct.
And what was sort of the catalyst or the event or experience that kind of turned that light bulb on, and it was like, oh my goodness, I am intuitive?
I don't know that there has been just one. I'll be honest with you, that kind of thing is still happening to me. I really mean that. Like, I'm not trying to be I'm being really serious, quite sincerely. It's still happening to me. And there are sessions when I go so deep into understanding something that I get scared, and I have to work with that, which I'll speak to if it moves in that direction. But I guess my main answer is that the first time I gave tarot card readings professionally in 2014, like for like real money, in a shop, which is sort of where I came up and did, you know, really, I think, built the backbone of the reader that I am. Even though I've been reading tarot for 20 years, it's not the same as when you're sitting in front of a paid client.
Totally.
It's harsh to say that, but it's true. And when I was sitting down with people, I was understanding that there was something happening between the tarot and my training as a coach and holistic counselor and my trauma work, and then this other indefinable understanding that I was having that actually got a conduit through that. Because I just had always assumed that the knowing was like a bossiness on my part. Like I just sort of was always like, I have an opinion for everything. I don't always share it. And I had always been the person, even in my messiest places, like looking back, it's like a movie. You know, it's like the person who's hanging out with the guy and all of a sudden they realize they're in love with the guy. And I just had never thought that that was intuition. I didn't get it. That idea of knowing. And I say that to almost, I have to say that to almost every student that I have, because many people feel like it's always going to be a bug in the ear. And it's not for a lot of people. It's like, you get it. I know you do, because you're an intuitive too. Like it's a knowing in the heart, in the body, in the mind. And sometimes there's absolutely a hearing or a seeing or an understanding. And it's so much more vague and indefinable and yet completely unquestionable. And that was the moment, that first day where it all clicked in for me. And I was like, I'm hearing things for people, like understanding things that they did not tell me, that is beyond what they shared. And yeah, and yet in conjunction with that, there were many other times where I would sit in front of someone and think, I don't have any idea what's going on with this person at all, because intuition is a muscle that has to be built and flexed, and there has to be enormous amounts of practice and willingness to fail hard and to question those fails with a lot of compassion. And you know, but now there's a trust there that whatever needs to come through will come through. But there have been moments over time, but I think that was the first one. And that just happened like not that long ago, where I was doing an event and I had an experience. I won't even get into it, but I had an experience where I thought like, wow, I knew exactly like a name. And yeah, and that's something that even just saying that, like, I feel like anyone who's listening, just don't even let your brain chemistry get attached to that, because that never happens to me. And that's not my gift or my flow. And that's not what being an intuitive means for many people. But God will sometimes give me these little situations. And if people really pay attention without comparison, they'll notice like, what are mine, where like proof of God, these moments when it's unquestionable you're having an intuitive experience. And that was one of those, like, just like a little swat in the butt from divine being like, bitch, like, you know,
here's a name for you.
Yeah, here's a name for you, and don't expect another anytime soon, you know.
Totally.
You know, like don't go looking for that shit. But yeah, I think that's when I knew, and I'm still learning it. I really am. I am. Yeah.
And I love what you brought up too, just about just our expectations of like,
oh my God,
what intuition looks like, and like what it's going to be like to be intuitive, because I didn't actually know myself as intuitive until I was like 34. And before that, I was still intuitive. Like we've always been intuitive.
Yeah.
But I was always writing myself off and just discrediting it and being like, no, it doesn't match my like conception of what intuition is or what it should be, or like I call it the gold standard of like of intuition, that like if you're not this tall, you can't go on the ride. Right?
You hear that?
Yeah. And for me, I always felt like I was falling short of this like arbitrary measurement or standard, that because I also felt, you know, all intuitives or real intuitives are mediums. I thought that they were just the same thing. Yeah. And because I wasn't communicating with spirits, I was like, okay, I'm not intuitive. I also thought that intuition was having access to really random trivia about people. Right?
We have the same, yes.
That like you'd go, because sometimes I would go receive a reading and it's like, oh, you know, your aunt from whatever.
I know.
Whatever. Or like your grandpa's name starts with an H. And I was like, oh my God, how did you know that? Right? But then because I didn't, and I still don't, like in my readings, the readings that I give, I'm never, ever going to be like, oh, something's coming through with the letter P in it.
That's not my flow.
Not my flow at all either. But for decades, those expectations and those just ideas of what it meant to be intuitive prevented me from recognizing and honoring and appreciating the fact that, hey, I'm intuitive too, right? Like, thank you. Yeah.
You're intuitive too. Yeah.
What are some of the ways that you've seen, either in yourself or in the people that you're working with, ways that intuition shows up or ways that intuition flows through?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's really varied. The thing that I think well, one of them I guess is a little bit more expected answer, which is that I know some people who have deep gifts with visuals and dreams, and some have very deep understandings of things, very deep knowing, and other people really hear. And that's the more, I think, expected answer. But the beauty of the seeing of that is very often that it's watching kind of the wand find the wizard, watching the intuitive find the tool, which is very exciting. And sometimes it's just them on them. And other times, you know, obviously I read and teach tarot, so there's a lot of tarot, but I also don't just do tarot. I do a lot of intuitive counseling work, which is honestly the majority of what I do. And that is all about just hanging out and observing what I see or what I'm hearing or what I'm feeling for someone around, like just those gentle nudges in the direction of the breadcrumb trail that I'm seeing that they may not be aware of. And then typically they walk to the point in the forest and that tool reveals itself to them. And I've had many people like that. So, yeah, it's come through in all different kinds of ways. And then a lot of the time where what I think I've seen more than the gift, just as much as the gift shining out, or the tool finding its way to the hand of the healer that's meant to use it, or the intuitive that's meant to use it. What I find very valuable is what chemically, practically, or emotionally is barring them from that, which we could talk about for another 5 hours, but that
Totally.
is something that I really value, and that I think I am particularly good at understanding and inviting people into this idea that there are such subtleties that the brain will go to try and invite us away from that sense of openness.
Yeah.
And sometimes that reflection is all it takes for someone to majorly expand or up level in some, I say up level has such a loaded connotation. Just be available for a different kind of development in a whole new way. It's the exact same thing as someone really helping someone be aware that they're in maybe a kind of an intuitively related plateau, and inviting them into a new stage of commitment with it. I think it's as varied as the people themselves, which is so exciting.
Yeah. And I think it's also really, it's encouraging and kind of hope providing that, if people say maybe people don't resonate with tarot, and they're like, oh, because I don't know how to read tarot, or I'm not very good at it, then I can't be an intuitive. But if it's like, there's literally 7 billion tools through to be intuitive, that it's just a matter of getting curious about it, and like you say, being available for like, how is intuition showing up for me? And for me personally, it's one of the most exciting times in my life if I can be a witness to someone who's like, oh my God, that was intuition? And I'm like, yeah, it was intuition. And then everyone's like, ah! And it's just like this, it really is a celebration when the light goes on and you're like, wait a sec, you mean that was intuition? Like that?
Yeah.
It's like the fish that can't see the water that it's in, right? Like something that's so obvious and so natural that you literally don't see it. And then sometimes it just takes another person coming in and being like, hey, I noticed this.
Yes.
And it's like, really? That's amazing. Yeah.
I love that. Yes, 100% agreed on that one. It's beautiful.
Can you speak a little bit more to the nervous system and just how to cultivate and like soothe the nerves in a way to be available for intuition?
Yeah, I mean, what do I not have to say about it? please rein me in. I am super passionate about this topic and I'll have to curb myself with love. The nervous system and the brain and brain chemistry have everything to do with intuition, and they're never spoken about in the same vein. There are so many mentally imbalanced healers running around out there believing that one has nothing to do with the other. And I don't say mentally ill. All of us, I can be mentally imbalanced one day because of hormones or contraction or whatever, that there is an imbalance literally. And you can still be deeply functional in your life, but profoundly uncomfortable. And with adjustments to food and water and willingness to be inquiring. And if someone has a practice of meditation or medication or neurotransmitter therapy or whatever they have, we reach for what helps. And So that's not an accusatory thing. Anyone who has intuition has enormous brain chemistry waves. It's the idea. They go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Put very simply, my advice to people is the thing that you're not looking at or not wanting to deal with the most, that you think is what you have to fix in order to tune in with your guides, is the path to tuning in with your guides. Because there is, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir, but there's a real delicateness to communicating with guides and to hearing our guides and being really living with guides that's not like any other human relationship, because they want us to go through the full spiral of experience, because they're here to help us evolve into the fullest extent of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's something we're afraid to look at, that's about as far as we're going to take someone else.
Yeah.
And that's about as far as we'll plumb into the depths of our own channels. So I had to have a holistic psychiatrist. I absolutely had to have that. I have PTSD. I'm a very healthy and joyful survivor of extreme abuse. I personally absolutely needed, and my life was saved by being on amino acid therapy. I would recommend it to anyone. Not going to work for everyone, but would recommend it to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that it's not a coincidence that around the same time I really was able to hear, I was on that.
Yeah.
Because if someone has big trauma or huge brain chemistry waves, the voice of the guides, that channel is so thin and delicate that it's very hard to hear it over the brain. So it has to become a deep, slow, gentle, we have nothing but time here on this plane, despite what we think, a really slow shift to deep commitment to befriending the brain. Mm-hmm. And getting really clear and very curious and really patient around, oh, interesting, okay, there's some really strong messaging coming through. And I'm not sure whether it's my brain or whether this is guides. So I'm going to just start with the beginning, and I'm going to check in around, is there a should attached to the message? If so, that's not guides. Okay. Mm-hmm. Is there a you've got to do?
Or else.
That's, or else. That's right. Perfect qualifier. It's not guides. If mm-hmm. it has anything to do with manipulation, negativity, I have found very often guides don't really drop in something that's too heavy for the brain to handle. Not in the way we expect them to. Like if I need to pay attention to, like the image that's coming to my mind is that, like let's say we were walking the woods, and despite our paying attention to it, let's say we got bitten by a tick. Mm-hmm. We may not get a giant message like there is a tick on you. But what will happen? We'll start seeing repetition of ads for like Offspray and a million different kind of things in a row will come up around Lyme or Lyme disease or ticks or whatever. And something completely random will happen. We'll be too hot. We'll take off our sweater. We'll have an itch. And then all of a sudden there it will be. And that's their way. Mm-hmm. That's their way. So there has to be a willingness to pay attention and to really get very clear around whether or not our chemical body needs some adjustment before we can go as deep as we'd like to go. I have nothing but some people I know that's a lot to hear maybe. Like if someone is listening to this and they're really deeply suffering and doing everything they can, I'm absolutely not saying that if someone has really strong brain chemistry or really strong panic, they can't hear their guides, because that's not true. But it's part and parcel. And the louder the brain is, usually the harder it is to hear and be really clear.
Yeah.
And so often it's about doing what we need to do for the body first, and then dropping in with the question that we had, because that's, from my really humble understanding, my own life, how guides kind of roll. It's like, we'll ask, like, what am I meant to be doing with my, with this project? And we might get like Queen of Pentacles, which might have us believe like, okay, money, whatever, but it can also be, have you checked in with your body today?
Yeah.
Have you touched the ground? Has your nervous system been trying to talk to you for the last couple of days? And have you been distracting yourself with thoughts about like how I can do this program or whatever? And that's I think the step that most people miss with respect to development of the intuition, that there really needs to be a big emphasis placed on brain, because I would say, again, with enormous humility, because I am sometimes wrong with my readings and in my channel. Sometimes when I have to do cleanup for another intuitive, like someone's gone to an intuitive and they've done a real
botch job.
Yes, exactly. Sometimes I have had people come to me. I get that a lot, where people will kind of privately be like, I had a bad experience. Can I come to you? Because I'm not sure if they were right. 99.9% of the time, the intuitive is actually not trying to abuse the client. It's that their own brain chemistry limitations got in the way of them really interpreting the complexity of what wanted to come through. So there needs to be a really persistent dedication to that. And that's, just put quite simply, like just dealing with your own shit. That's it. And so your body is not the same as someone else's body. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to anyone. Yeah. Everyone's body is really similar. So my body needs certain things and doesn't need certain things that other people need, and vice versa, So yeah, like I'm a relatively flexible and kind of like easygoing gal with certain things, but I amino acids have continued to make it possible for me to not even be functional, but like absolutely thrive in a way I never thought was possible for the level of trauma that I've had to my body. And there is a certain standard of food and a certain amount of food, a certain kind of food that there's no way I can get around it. There's a certain amount of water, no way I can get around it during a day. I really can't have certain, like, as much as I want them. I really can't have certain foods. And if I do, I have to be really careful about being like, all right, cool. I'm going to feel like real shit for 3 days and I'm not going to add on to this. But how they can do it is, I mean, there are many processes, but I think first starting with the simplicity of just their own experience without any kind of comparison, because I think everyone's experienced trauma, but I'll say for myself, in my limited community, there are only really a handful of women that I know who've been through quite the level in childhood that I have. And it's not like he's had, she's had. It's that it's an apples and oranges, and I have to make sure that I'm not comparing my oranges with their apples. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's important for everyone.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And with that, with the brain chemistry, because I've been noticing it myself a lot lately, being offline compared to being online makes the biggest difference. Dana, I know. It makes a huge difference. And, before I was thinking, like my business is an online business, like it's a virtual
what the hell am I going to do?
Yeah, like I need to be online. And choosing to listen to my body and come offline, I was just like, oh my God, this is like, what a difference coming offline. Yeah. Way more balancing.
It's like the veil is lifted completely.
Mm-hmm.
When I broke my foot earlier this year, the one thing I absolutely knew without knowing why, I didn't know why, was I was like, I cannot have Instagram on my phone. Like the whole app needs to be deleted until future notice. And it cut cords from me that I didn't even know were running through me. It actually created distance between me and other people that I had a perceived connection with. Like I thought we were in something or that there was a thing, but it was really just that I was in this person's flow every day, all the fucking time, because we're connected through these electronic means. And I'm still on Instagram, but I try very hard when I'm not using it to actually delete it. And I will just continue to re-download it because it, I admire you so much. That's the dream. You're living the dream. You really are.
But it's, you know, I have been going back in and coming back out, but what I'm trying to cultivate now, because I noticed such a difference deleting the app off my phone. And I think, like, I love Instagram. I really do love it.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love Instagram?
Yeah, Instagram's great.
And I kind of went through withdrawal coming off of it. But then once I had like skirted those, whatever, 4 days of just like, I don't have Instagram on my phone. It was like, I don't have Instagram on my phone. This feels so good.
Yeah. And it's like a phantom limb. For the first few days, you go to check and you're like,
it's not even on here. Yeah.
Not on here. Can't do it.
Can't do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was just something from my own experience in terms of settling my nervous system down and just balancing me.
Crucial.
Completely. Taking regular, dedicated, complete breaks from social media.
Important. Crucial, really. Not even just important, crucial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could seriously talk to you for 10 hours. I know that it's like getting late where you are and that we're basically at time right now. So I will wrap this up and say just thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you shared. It's been like a balm to my soul. Aww. BALM. I always like to clarify, not a BOMB, a BALM.
Thank you.
To my soul. And I know that whoever's watching and listening, it's just going to be so helpful, very medicinal, very reassuring, and just so real. That's what I love the most about you, is your realness.
Thank you very much. I loved this. Thank you so much. You're such a breath of fresh in every way. And yeah, I just really can't describe how much doing this meant. Thank you so much for asking me to be a part of this.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And for your kind words. Thank you.
And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Take care.